In my judgment, the only thing we're going to take with us when we leave this life is the humanity we've expressed to others, the way we've applied humanity to our business, the way we've made mankind our business. This is the thing that will go with us as we leave this life.
Well, my name is Paul Andrus, and I'm a member of Niles Rotary Club. And today we're very honored to have Rick King, former Rotary International President of the year 2001-2002, here with us. And the purpose of our interview today is to capture some of the stories and the experiences for new members about what Rick has experienced in his time in Rotary. And he invited me to join the Niles Rotary Club. I've been in the Rotary Club for 9 years, and it's honestly changed my life, the way I view things, and it's given me the opportunity to serve others and find happiness in doing so. Rick, you joined Rotary some time ago, and you had an experience. I believe there was some story about Italy or something like that. Can you tell us about that?
I joined Rotary in 1968. I didn't want to join. I was too busy. I was singing 3 shows a night in Las Vegas, and I was suing people, and I was enjoying both occupations. But an educator came to my office and asked me if I would like to visit the Rotary Club, named Paul Arrett. And I really liked him. I admired him. He was a wonderful man and a good friend. So I joined. And I remember the president of the club said, "We know you're busy. If you can just get once every 3 months, we'll give you a perfect attendance pin at the end of the year." I thought, well, I can handle that. Not long thereafter, I was going to Rome to do a television taping. And when I got to Rome, nothing was right. They'd given my room away. I had no place to stay. And I'm driving in a taxi down the Via Veneto, and I pass a grand hotel, and it says, "The Rotary Club of Rome meets here today." And I thought, I think I belong to that. So I'm going in to make out. In those days, in my early 20s, I got those terms make out and make up mixed up all the time. But I thought I might as well learn how to do that at a Rotary Club. So I walked in, and here were several hundred aging, distinguished, white-haired, patrician, all men, of course, in those days. And I sat down next to a aging, white-haired, patrician, Roman, banker, Rotarian. And I'm wearing my orange and brown plaid sport coat that I still bought in Las Vegas. And he said to me, "I see you're an American." And I thought, boy, he's smart. He knew that I hadn't said anything. And I said, "Yes, I'm from California." And he said, "I knew that." So I sat down and we became friends. And I told him my tale of woe, that I was looking for a place to stay. And the long and the short of it is that he took me to a hotel after the meeting, and I had a lovely suite of rooms, and I had a beautiful young Italian woman who was my guide. She was physically fit, long black hair, almond-shaped eyes, olive complexion. I don't remember all the details about her, but I remember a few. And she was my guide over 3 or 4 days, and we dined where Caesar dined, and we rode the Appian Way. We had an audience with the Pope. It was a great experience. When I went to check out of my box, or my hotel, there was a note in my box, and it said, "No charge. Happy to be of service to a Rotarian from so many miles away from home. Ciao," which in those days I thought was dinner. And on the way back, on the plane, flying back across the ocean to my home here in California, I couldn't figure out why he had done that. I couldn't figure out. He was an old man. I was very young. He had obviously a lot of money. I had none. He just did this out of the kindness of his heart. And I thought, I've learned something about the kind of person that Rotary creates, or the kind of person who's in Rotary. And I said to myself, someday I want to be like that man who does something for somebody without any expectation of return. At our international convention in Rome in 1979, I think it was, I went to look him up, but he had already passed away. But I've never forgotten him. And it was my first of many experiences in Rotary teaching me why I am a Rotarian. It was just a few years later that the district governor called me up and said, I want you to lead a group study exchange team to India. I didn't even know where India was. And I said, Governor, I want to go to Honolulu, not India. But he said, I want you to go to India. So off I went to India with 5 young Californians. We were all about the same age, really, because I wasn't very much older than they were. And I had an experience there that changed my life. I had a lot of experiences in India on that trip and on a dozen since then that have changed my life. But this one I'll never forget. The president of the Rotary Club was a physician. And he took me into a cow dung hut in a village, in a very poor village. And the floor of the village, of the hut, was dirt. And there was no roof on the hut. It was a sky of earth. And the walls were made of cow dung. And he knelt down beside me in front of a young woman whose head was all bandaged. And he had just operated on her with tools provided by the Rotary Foundation. And he had done a cataract surgery, which in this country is done in an hour. But over there in those days, 30, 40 years ago, it was a big deal. And this was the moment where they were going to see whether the sight had been restored. I sat down next to the doctor, facing the woman, next to a cow. The cow was very sacred and was there in the cow dung hut. Behind me were 2 young Indian children with matted hair, smudged white robes, and they were staring at this woman. And I concluded that they must be her children. The president of the club, the doctor, very gently began to unravel the bandages from this woman's head. And you could hear a pin drop. And in a moment, she opened her eyes. And for the first time in her life, she saw her own 3 children. I'll never forget the look on her face. I'll never forget it. It seared me. She wasn't the only one who got vision that day. I crawled out of that cow dung hut with a vision of what Rotary can do, not only for others, not only for this woman and her children, but what it did to me, being a participant. It changed my whole perspective on what it was all about, this Rotary organization. So many think that it's just a place where we go and have lunch and have a few laughs. But really, it changes people. It makes them better citizens, not only where they live, but in the global community as well. And I have lots of experiences like that.
Wow, that's amazing. I know that as I've joined the club, the thing that's kept me coming have been the ability to hear some of the experiences that you've had. And being the International Rotary President, getting to see how the money's spent and how people are being helped.
Well, in Rotary, I often am fond of saying that it's an extension of my faith. It's God's work on earth because we help people regardless of their religion, regardless of their politics, regardless of their color, regardless of their language. Every second of the day, we make the lame to walk, the blind to see, the deaf to hear. We clothe the naked, we feed the hungry, we heal the sick, we save lives, we bring hope, and we bring peace. And that's the thrust of Rotary. And in so doing, the Rotarian becomes a changed person, a much better human being.
And I understand that a few years ago, you have a dear friend who started an organization called the Wheelchair Foundation. And can you share a little bit about your involvement with that? And I believe there's a story involved where you were able to deliver.
Oh, lots of stories. I've been on many wheelchair distributions. Ken Baring in Blackhawk created the Wheelchair Foundation. He has a big plane, and he often flies things that are needed in some community around the world to help out in a humanitarian way. And as he tells the story, he was asked to go to Salt Lake City to pick up some foodstuffs from the LDS humanitarian arm and take them to Eastern Europe. And as they were doing that, there were some used wheelchairs being loaded on the plane. And they got to, I think it was Serbia, and he saw these people lined up who needed a wheelchair who didn't have one. And he called his friend, as I understand the story, from Kofi Annan, the General Secretary of the United Nations, and said, how many people in the world need a wheelchair that can't afford one? And the response came back, probably 150 million or 300 million, it was some such number. And Ken Baring, in his usual optimistic way, said, well, I can do that. He had the funds, the resources to do it. What he didn't have was the manpower. So he came to us at Rotary, to my predecessor, Frank Devlin from Mexico City, and to me, and asked if Rotary would partner with him, and we agreed that we would. And Rotarians have been on wheelchair distributions all over the world. And now we've distributed more than 1 million wheelchairs across the globe. It's quite an experience. And every time I've picked somebody up and put them in a wheelchair, I'm reminded that it's a blessing to have legs that work and arms that work and a body that functions. And as usual, the service has done more for me than it has done for the people we put in the wheelchair. The story you made reference to was one in Shanghai. I remember another one in New Jersey, in our own country, where we took a little girl, 6 years of age, born with spina bifida, from her father's arms and put her in a new red wheelchair. And I was supposed to give a speech. And this girl started to wheel herself in a wheelchair up and down the center aisle in the room. There were about 400 people in the room, 200 on this side, 200 over here on this side. And she was oblivious to the fact that almost every eye in the room was looking at her. And she began to wheel herself up and down the center aisle, having the time of her life. I put my speech back in my pocket because I thought nobody needs the speech now. That's the speech is right there in front of us. When it was all done, her father, a short Mexican man with tears streaming down his cheeks, came up to me and he said, Mr. King, thank you for this gift. Every time I carried her into a school playground, my heart broke because I knew that she couldn't understand why she couldn't get down and play soccer or kick the ball or run the way her two little brothers did, who were there that day also with their mother and father. And so now she will be able to get down in her wheelchair and kick the ball and play with them. So you've given a gift to not only my little girl, but to me, to her mother, and to her brothers. So we thank you. And I said, don't thank me. I have 2 artificial hips in me and an artificial knee. I've applied for an artificial brain, but I don't need a wheelchair. At least I've never needed a wheelchair. So I said to this young father, I don't need a wheelchair, so I really don't understand the gift we gave to your little girl today. But I will always remember the gift she gave to me. And the reason I do what I do in Rotary is because I'm selfish. I always get more than the person we're helping. I remember when I first joined this club, as I remember it, and I was new in the club, so I don't remember all the details, but it seems to me that the club sponsored a Boy Scout troop. And the boys in this troop were either blind or deaf or both, because of the School for the Blind and Deaf right here in Fremont. And from time to time, we'd bring these boys to the Niles Rotary Club meeting, and they would participate in the meeting with us. And I remember one day, I've told this story all over the world, sitting having my lunch. I arrived late, and I sat down with a fellow lawyer and two boys from the scout troop. One of them was obviously blind. And when he tried to put his spoon into the plate of food, he couldn't get it to his mouth without it spilling. And I watched this for a moment, and I saw my fellow lawyer, my fellow Rotarian, put his knife and fork down on his own plate, put his arm around the back of this blind Boy Scout, and gently help him lift his spoon to his mouth so that he could eat his lunch, letting his own lunch get cold, of course. And I watched that for 5 minutes. And I thought to myself, who here is the beneficiary the most? The blind Boy Scout? The Rotarian who helped him? Or me, who was getting to watch? All three of us benefited from this gesture. And I've got a book full of them.
I know that when I first joined Rotary, I went through a little bit of a hard time. My son, as you well know, as a friend, has had some surgeries and some hard times. And hearing that the Paul Harris Award, when a member donates $1,000 towards the Rotary Foundation, they receive a Paul Harris pin. And we're proud to wear these. And Rick has shared several times that when you donate $1,000 to the Rotary Foundation, you're in actuality saving 4 lives.
I got that from a dear friend of mine. One of the real benefits of Rotary is that the people you meet who influence you over the years, and I've had so many of them, starting with that old man in Rome and the man who invited me to join Rotary. But I was sitting in the back of a taxi in Evanston, Illinois, at Rotary World Headquarters, with my friend Mike Pedrick from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Mike was a powerful man, 6'4", I don't know, 300 pounds. Made a lot of money in oil in Oklahoma and dog food. 2 disparate industries, and he was successful in both. And he was a mentor of mine and a great friend. I stayed in his home in Tulsa many times over the years. And we were talking about the Rotary Foundation. And Mike Pedrick, who in his 30s was a Paul Harris Fellow and a director of Rotary International, said to me, you know, Rick, every time we get somebody to become a Paul Harris Fellow, we save 4 lives. We've shown how that happens. And I don't remember how he went on to explain it, but I've never forgotten the statistic. I've always thought it saves 5. It saves the Rotarian as well, because they become more committed to what it is. And when you separate a little of your money, one of my favorite experiences is a past district governor friend of mine who's since passed away down in Orange County. And he asked me to come down and speak at his club at a Thursday noon. So I had to miss our own club meeting, of course. And I flew down to John Wayne Airport, and he picked me up in his big black car. And I could tell that he wasn't his usual self. Well, my wife and I had a somber experience this morning, Rick, with our daughter and her new husband. We went to the children's wing of the county hospital, and we brought home our very first grandchild. And I congratulated him, and I said, well, that's wonderful. Well, it was, because she was born 10 days ago, he said, on a Sunday. And the doctors told us that she probably wouldn't live. We couldn't see her for a week. And he said, my daughter cried the whole week, the child's mother. My wife cried, the child's grandmother. The young husband had no idea how to console his wife. But last Sunday, 1 week after the birth, and 3 or 4 days before I got there, the doctor called and said, you can come for just a few seconds today. We think we've elevated her to 50-50. You know, he said, Rick, when you go to a children's wing of a county hospital to see a sick child, and it's your own child, it's not much fun. You know that. So they took us into a room with one patient about this big, laying there on a bed, hooked up to a big machine with tubes and wires. You know how they do. And Carol and I put our arms around each other and we wept. We prayed. I wanted to do something to help this little baby live. And then he says, I got the shock of my life. Because there in the corner of the machine was the rotary wheel. And I rubbed my eyes, and underneath it there was a little plaque, and it said, this machine was donated by the Rotarians of the Rotary Club of Orange. My club, he said. My mind raced back 3 years earlier when the president of the club stood up and said, the children's wing needs a new machine. It's not going to be cheap. It's going to cost $1 million. But we are Rotarians, and I think we can do it. So he said, I thought I should set an example because I'm a past district governor. I've been in Rotary 30 years, and so I wrote a check. Because you know, Rick, Rotary's always asking for a little of our money. Then he said, I sold beer and hot dogs at the club fundraiser at the county fair. Because you know, Rick, Rotary's always asking for a little of our time. And I forgot all about it. I've been in Rotary 30 years. How many projects? How many checks? How many hot dogs? 30 years. I forgot all about it until last Sunday, when that machine was keeping my first grandchild alive. And he began to cry. And I began to cry. It's hard to describe what each of us felt. A little time and a little money. And he looked at me and he said, Rick, how did we ever get so lucky to belong to a club that's always asking us to give a little? Because you can't give it away. Sooner or later, one way or another, always and inevitable, it comes back. You can't give it away. So I believe in what we're doing, the Rotary Foundation. And this year, of course, is the 100th anniversary of the foundation. It's done a lot. And I have so many stories of projects that I've seen the foundation do over and over and over again. We were in Ethiopia, and the club asked if I would come to a project, and I was very tired. But I went up there, 7 hours in a Jeep, and we came to a meadow, and they took me to a well, one water well. And there were little boys standing on the other side of the well, their sunken cheeks, sunken eye sockets, sunken stomachs, each holding a little brass cup about this big. And my aide said, Rick, this is the day they get to come to the well. They get to come here every 2 days, every 48 hours. And they get to fill their cup half full with fresh water. And that's the amount of water they get to drink every 2 days. He said, we don't save them all. Some die all the time, but we're saving more and more and more, thanks to Rotary. There was a plaque on the side of the well. This well was dug with donations from contributions to Rotarians, to the Rotary Foundation of Rotary International. But once again, I can't even comprehend what we did for those boys on the other side of the well. I can't comprehend it. But I can tell you that being there once again changed me. Changed me. And I realized that there's more to this life than just suing people, making money. I had a successful career in that field, and I enjoyed it. But in my judgment, the only thing we're going to take with us when we leave this life is the humanity we've expressed to others, the way we've applied humanity to our business, the way we've made mankind our business. This is the thing that will go with us as we leave this life. And Rotary has given me the chance to engage this most important business, more important than any other business I've done. I've enjoyed them all, the singing, the speaking, the lawyering. It's all been great. But it's the mankind, the humanity, the business of people that I've enjoyed the most.